Christy's here. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're still setting up, but Elizabeth is here. Oh, I'm not looking in the right place, and you're going to call the meeting. I forgot. Not me. At 7:30.
We have to talk about that. But hi, hello, everybody. It's nice to see Christy, Steve, and this is Ed.
You have to say words for them to see.
Hello. Oh, Steve Wallace is.
And so we're calling the meeting to order. Here. Welcome to everyone. Yeah, Christy just left. Steve, is it possible you could be on camera? It's so much more personable.
I usually am working and I look like crap. I just got off of a framing job. So.
I'm in my work clothes too, so don't worry.
Yeah,
Hey.
But all right, so we're called to order the Sustainability Committee of United Neighborhood Council at 7:30. It's Thursday, September 14th. And let's review the agenda. Okay, at the end, you can add comments or change order or add something to it. So general comments for 1 to 2 minutes in the beginning, then we have a proposed community impact statement, sort of important, regarding cooling apparatus on all rental units. That's citywide, and that was the unanimous city council mandate recently. Number 4 is I have a report from NCSA that I attended on Sunday. 5, we have an update on KYCC tree plantings. Then we'll go to old business and we'll adjourn. Any comments on that agenda, or someone would like to change it or add something?
Can't really change or add it. It's been Brown Act.
Oh, okay.
Unless it's
Thank you
old,
for
unless somebody has something for old business that's been on a prior agenda.
Okay. That's what I always to do. All right, so let's open it up to, let's start with introductions, please. So Elizabeth Fenner, we're on 4th Avenue. You know?
Great. Laura Myers. I live in Angeles Vista and I am on the board of UNNC. I'm its vice president.
Ed Saunders on 20th Street, Western Heights. On the board.
Christy.
Hi, Christy Webb. I live on 4th Avenue, along with some other people who live and work on 4th Avenue who are here at the meeting.
And Steve Wallace in Harvard Heights.
Okay. So all of us got very busy last month, but we're going to do general public comments first. If anyone has any.
Los Angeles is going to get 2,000 or more bus shelters. It was in my email feed today. I'm not sure who from where, but it was very exciting. I took the bus today because I was stranded on my bike, and I want to put this on their website that bus shelters are great, but what was really great is that the bus I needed came in under 5 minutes.
What exactly do you mean by a bus shelter?
It, you know how a bus call
So that if it's raining.
or sunny, and it'll be all digitized, so it'll tell you when the next bus is coming.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so my general public announcement is simply that you see at the bottom of the screen, we are
Transcribe.
live transcripting tonight. So that as we finish up our conversation on the proposed community impact statement, we actually have it in writing, hopefully, to some extent. But also because it's a cool technology.
Anybody else? Any?
Okay. We'll move on.
All right, going on to proposed community impact statement. Yes.
So, I guess I'll just bring us up to speed. What we were supposed to do in the last 30 days is try to draft a final version of our proposed community impact statement, and nobody did. So we're just here to talk again, but we're gonna need to, this is it, we have to do a motion to close this out tonight. At the last meeting, we had previously recommended, this committee had recommended supporting the motion, but with some added caveats. So basically more reports, and some changes. So, you know, for example, reporting back from the city how landlords would be supported if they need to rewire their buildings just to accommodate this. And also what the real impact would be on the electrical grid. At our committee meeting, so the board sent it back to committee, I'm speaking mostly to Ed. And the committee last month changed it from, Steve, if you recall the exact language, we were no longer gonna vote to support the motion, but rather that we were going to, Steve, I can't remember the exact language, but we had to not support it unless they would meet these certain things, you know.
I forget exactly, but it was quite a bit of this
Right, so
pushback on it.
we did a pushback. And if push comes to shove tonight, if no one's really remembering, I can probably, I don't know how to do this, go into the Zoom and get the tape, but I think we should just further discuss it and just finalize our motion. Because we can't keep going because the reports are beginning to pour in to the city.
Just so I understand. So the committee now, we're trying to come up with either language that's gonna go back to the board. Okay, that they will accept and either support or
not.
just,
They still may not accept.
Right, exactly. But ideally, if we can come up with something that everybody's comfortable with, that would probably be the best thing.
Right, so I think tonight we just do, because we did not draft a community impact statement in advance. I think what we do is just finalize our bullet points and authorize Elizabeth, me and Charlie, who didn't do it the last time, but we better, but authorize us to finalize a proposed community impact statement to present to the board, reflecting the bullet points that we've already been discussing, but we need to re-look at those bullet points, and we can also review the tape from last month. And we might be able to review the tape live here.
You got the bullet points?
I don't, no, that's what I'm saying, it was all tape.
Hmm.
And then no one got around to even listening to the tape.
Something was wrong.
I know, I understand, so that's why I keep saying, Steve, because you helped lead that whole discussion. Do you have any memory, or do I need to somehow figure out how to launch that tape?
Yeah, sorry, no recollection at all. I apologize.
I'm recalling it.
Okay, so
And-
why don't you start writing on the back of one of these?
Okay, as I recall, the mandate was to provide cooling to every rental unit. In a write-up that I saw recently, they did add cooling apparatus or something that reduced the temperature of a residence. And I object to the across the board, every unit mandate and then the unintended consequences of that. Expenses, increased emissions, increased energy use. So for me, bullet points would be, if we have 15,000 rental units in the city of Los Angeles, and I think it is something like 15,000. Actually, I mean, it's possible to put into place something more information gathering and comprehensive. Nice photo.
Oh, I'm sorry to do this live, you guys. I haven't figured out how to do it not live.
Laura is pictured on the UNNC website. Nice smiling faces. So one would be to ask the city to find out how many residents in these residential places, if they could find out how many have heat or cooling problems. And then offer homeowners, or not, landlords different ways to reduce that temperature and incentivize different methods besides just putting in an air conditioning unit. And maybe it would be possible to monitor apartments that have complaints that are not sufficiently corrected. Like, that's my point, is that I'd like it to be more surgical than across the board. First, is there a problem? Let's find out what are the problems. 2, what are the different methods to solve the problem? And 3, how do you follow up?
That's fine. And I may not be a finder.
Is there a way to find out what credits, tax credits or other kind of credits are available?
There are no tax credits available for this.
There aren't any at all
Nope.
from federal government or anything?
No, for this mandate?
Well,
For giving portable air conditioners to
or
tenants?
doing something to reduce the heat. There's no kind of incentive available.
No.
Do they know that? Has anybody?
Except insofar as I think heat pump air conditioners are rebated.
Right, but
And
they're not,
insulation's rebated.
but they're not talking about that for this initiative. Right. This initiative is very specific to providing air conditioning for multifamily rented units and nothing else.
That's covering from 4 and from 5 and above. Or are we talking-
it's
are we talking
duplex,
about
I think
one-
duplexes.
Duplexes, we're talking everything.
We're talking about everything that's
Okay.
multifamily. And any age of any building. And there may be there are rebate programs, but they're not for the landlords. They're for the occupants. And they're, LADWP, I mean, I can share that screen. It's not that hard. Well, it isn't gonna be shut down. It just needs to be.
Amended.
Well, okay, this is what because after that was introduced at our board meeting, I just have done some additional things. And I look at it, the nefarious part, potentially, from landlord's perspective, even though I am a landlord, it's like, what if somebody had a big building? They say they gotta put in central heating, central cooling. We need to clear out the building, so that they can get low-paying renters out of the building.
Okay. Remember, we have people over there.
Okay.
It could be an opportunity.
It could be an opportunity
bad actions or to evict.
Exactly, for eviction. And that was one thing that's been nagging me on this whole thing, especially hearing about how there's a lot of evictions going on, and it seems like it's a opportunity for opportunists.
Okay.
And for landlords, so who might have the sort of breathing space to take advantage of those exploitative practices, where if it's in the hands of the resident is much more likely to do what they need to do in an honest way.
Well, again, the initiative is for landlords to provide for their units this air conditioning.
And this is based on the fact that today it is illegal for a landlord to have an apartment that gets too cold, that can't get warm, right?
Correct.
Is similar wording that it can't get too hot?
Well, it isn't similar wording, but it could become that.
So that's first, is to put it in.
Well, that
just
was one of
create
the
a
things we
standard.
said, create a standard. You had said that,
Yeah.
if you want to bullet point that.
Yes.
Was create a standard of too hot, just as there is a standard of minimum heat levels. And I mean, it's very specific. If you work on if you're working on rehabbing a house, so even a single family house that's not yet occupied, when building safety comes through, you want to make sure that you have sent heat at 36 inches high or whatever it is of a certain amount.
Right.
Hard to measure it in the middle of the summer, but that's a standard.
And
I'm
residents,
trying to show you the current LADWP. I'm trying to answer more than one question at a time. And this is what LADWP has turned in lately to the Energy and Environment Committee, where this is moved to, of the city council. So they're saying they have financial assistance. It's hard to understand their presentation, but they are looking at the number of residential customers who rent and who do not have air conditioning. They estimate that to be 191,000. I'm going to say residential customers must be units, not
Can't.
people.
you think there's 191,000 apartments?
Well, a residential customer is somebody who's got an account. So that could be an individual or it could be a family.
Okay.
So yes, I think they're estimating that in Los Angeles, 191,000 units, customers. Well, some of those are houses. So units, but it could be a house. Do not have air conditioning. And of those, they don't really know. So, they think somewhere between 30 and 147,000 are income qualified renters, meaning they would qualify for subsidy programs. And somewhere between 44,000 and 161,000 are not income qualified renters. So they don't really know, because these are pretty wide ranges. And that obviously adds up to more than the 200,000, because they're estimating the ranges. So they're just looking at the LADWP discount rate participants, and I do not even know what a CEC residential appliance saturation survey is, frankly, the other thing. Then there's a program called Cool LA, and this computer is as bad as others. So basically, it seems that for income qualified tenants, they can get $225 for one air conditioner, but that's about the cost. So that's like 100% of the cost, because you buy them through the program. For non-income qualified renters, it looks like it's a $75 rebate program, is as much as I can extrapolate from this.
It's affordable, so it doesn't need to be installed.
They're not at the moment really differentiating between a window unit.
Which has to be installed.
Well, somebody has to put it in so it doesn't crash through the window.
And it doesn't have to have a new outlet,
No, it has to plug in.
but it has to plug in really close.
It has to plug in really close to the window.
So they might have to have.
On a line that's somewhat dedicated.
Yeah.
So you cannot be plugging in an air conditioner, whether it's a roll-around portable or a window unit, where you're also running your microwave and a toaster oven. I can attest. It has to be on a more dedicated line. Steve, do you have any sense of that? I mean, how much can run, or Ed, with an air conditioner? I mean, you can do a microwave and an air conditioner, but not a third thing?
I don't have it.
Yeah, that is correct. It's funny, I have a building where each unit only has a main breaker of 30 amps, which is not much.
Oh, no, not much at all.
But it splits inside the subpanel, inside the unit of the subpanel to 6 20 amp circuits. That tenant placed one of the console air conditioning units, the types that just sit on the floor, and they have a little tube that vents the hot air out through a window.
Right.
And when they had that on along with their microwave, obviously, then it would trip the breaker. So they have that issue, which it would trip the main breaker. So
Right.
but they have a window unit in the bedroom, which has its own circuit, its own 20 amp circuit, and that works fine.
Right, but potentially, yeah, because that's an overload. I mean, that whole system's overloaded, but yeah.
Did you provide that portable unit?
I did not.
Okay, so we're digressing just because I've got this thing shared. The LADWP is trying to answer the question of what will this do to the grid, but it doesn't really tell the answer, unfortunately. I mean, this doesn't seem, what they're really doing is comparing types of air conditioners and not presenting a scenario where the current grid is and what this would add to the total. They're just showing the different kinds of air conditioners and what they would do to the grid. So that doesn't, to me, answer our question of what does all this added air conditioning do to the grid?
Well, they're not answering that
They
question?
are correct. Yes, they are not answering that question. If you look at the chart,
But what I'm saying is, wouldn't that be the question for them to answer?
that's the question we've been asking. Yes.
If they can't answer that question, how can they go forward with a mandate?
Okay. Well, wouldn't we be putting as our bullet point? Because remember, the final community impact statement is not really very long, so we're gonna have to edit. But our bullet point would be, please require LADWP to actually analyze how all of these new air conditioning units would affect the total grid. So thus far, the analysis is only comparing kinds of air conditioners.
I got one more question for you, Laura.
I'm sorry, you see how this is not so easy to navigate this damn report. Go ahead. Okay,
You mentioned that the air conditioners will be purchased under a program? Is
now
that-
there currently is a program through LADWP, a different program called Cool LA, where an income qualified person can acquire an air conditioner for a very low or almost zero, depending on the future cost, because they get they have the ability to purchase it through LADWP. So you go on the website and you can pick one. And they also get, in effect, a rebate. And so sometimes that rebate amount is the same as, sometimes you have to pay something. And you and I can also go and buy through this program on the website, but we're not going to get much of a discount. I mean, we might as well go to Lowe's or wherever, just shop for a wider variety. That might meet our needs, but they do have low price air conditioners through that program. That's not what this motion's about, because that program is established. This motion is about saying to landlords, owners of properties, that they must provide air conditioners in the units, and that would be presumably whether or not a tenant wants it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's one of my problems is that, it makes the tenant, the renter, not safe. Correct. And not empowered. So if we could add wording that says empower the tenant to buy the unit, applying for the discount that they're able to get through the DWP and potentially have the landlord pay the difference. If it needs to be free to them, if
Well, yeah, but
the cooling should really be part of their living standard, then they shouldn't have to pay for it.
okay, but see, I think
that
this
right?
begs the point. I don't think it's a big deal for most landlords. It is for some to figure out how to help a tenant have one air conditioner that goes in the window or rolls around their living room. If they have to rewire to accommodate that, that's a huge deal. Could be a $40,000 to $80,000 deal for a small apartment building.
That goes back to my point.
Yeah, that it's like, how can this happen? Not should a landlord help a tenant, in other words, they're just looking at the piece of hardware, the appliance. And they're not looking at the structure.
And going back to what I was saying, if a landlord sees that they gotta fork out whatever number you threw.
Well, the
30,
80,000 is
80,000.
real,
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
we've got a bid on them.
So if they figure they gotta fork out $80,000, now I gotta get something out of this, and maybe that in the long run. And maybe if I gotta put this 80 grand out, I need to get rid of some people that's paying low rents that can, help me recoup my 80 grand. And so that's what I'm saying. We're
Right.
opening up a whole lot of possibilities of.
Right. And Steve has his hand up, I now see.
Steve,
Yeah, I wanted to bring something up that we hadn't yet talked about that will certainly happen. Yes, landlords are going to have to pay, and I estimated about $20,000 per unit. Could be much more when you include in engineering and all of that. But I would imagine most landlords would then fill out the paperwork with the housing department to have the tenant pay for half of that cost. I know I would. And that is broken down over a period of 5 years. And on a monthly basis, that's going to be about $175 rent increase for tenants, many of whom are really on the edge as far as I've got many tenants that are just, an extra $100 would kill them. $175, forget it. And so, yeah, there's probably a lot of landlords that say, hey, that's great. Get rid of these low paying tenants. This is the perfect opportunity for me. So that's one thing that's being lost in this. The landlords are paying a huge chunk of money up front, and they're going to be gradually reimbursed over the period of 5 years. And that comes at the expense of the tenants. So no one is talking about that. And that's certainly something that I think we all need to be cognizant of. So that tenant could take the $175 that they would be paying and maybe buy a fairly inexpensive air conditioning unit with some rebates, and then they're done. Or
Well, unless they can't plug it in because it will blow the circuit. We're still, yeah.
I think, but there's other technologies to cool places other than an air conditioning. You can get a high powered fan that may not, that wouldn't necessarily blow the circuit. And how many, granted, there's been some hot days, but how many extreme days? I know they're projecting now that there's going to be more and more, but still, it seems like we're trying to solve a huge mandate for a problem that is evolving, and we don't know where it's going.
Right.
And so it's like it just seems like overkill.
Well, and again, I understand why we want to make sure senior citizens, people who have medical
But
issues,
they're not stipulating into that.
they are not. They're saying all units.
Exactly.
Right, they are not. But again, I think the bigger problem, and Steve, I'm not even sure right at this moment in time it's very easy for the landlords to go into that program. I'm forgetting what it's called, but it's major rehabilitation, right? I mean, not evicting people, but where you get your,
Correct.
you know, are they allowing that again? Because you wouldn't have been able to do that during COVID, obviously.
Yeah, I'm sure they are because of all the soft story retrofits. I'm just waiting to get the C of O on mine because I will back charge the tenants for that because it's my right to do so.
Okay, and it's, you know, it's not that's not even a perfect program for the landlord. So it's, if I'm not mistaken, we did it once some years ago. It's 50%. I mean, in other words, if something costs 50,000, it's 25,000 that can be in the program. And you're saying spread over 5 years. Ours was spread over 10, but it may have been because it was so much money. And you know, where you every month collect, you know, and also ours was capped at $60 a month. So do you think there's not a cap anymore? I mean, we did this 10 years ago. So have you done this?
I've only done it once. And I think also for me, I think it was 2009.
Right. So, right. But that said, yes, that's because a person might have to rewire completely. Just to accommodate this. Now, so the landlords have the benefit, if they do rewire the whole building, they have an improved building. So that obviously adds some value at some point in time if they were to ever sell. But these folks who are proposing this program never even considered the costs, the infrastructure cost of landlords. And they don't seem to be considering the infrastructure impacts on the aggregate electrical grid.
Correct.
Right, so those would be the language, I think.
Or the pass-through cost to the tenant.
Or the potential pass-through
cost to the tenant.
Potential pass-through cost. That's a good phrase. Because that's what Steve's addressing. All right. So were there other issues on this? Because your initial thing when you looked at it, you really wanted a performance standard.
Yes, so, yeah. Just like the heating, we could have a cooling performance standard and then allow landlords to provide that standard in a number of different ways.
Right, so this would not be the only option.
Yes, that includes fans, a whole house fan, insulation, window shades, window awnings, a heat pump AC, working windows, depending, because it's possible that some of these units have like double pane windows that don't work anymore.
You mean so that they can have the air at the top and
the bottom, because that might
be all it takes.
Right.
To get to that standard.
And this year might be especially because it hasn't been that hot. But last summer, a year ago, was awful. Steve, your hand's still up or it's up again?
Yeah, up again. I just had two other things. The first was related to the energy, the extra energy consumption that this would precipitate. I would also like to know how DWP will be expediting installation of rooftop solar and battery storage instead of basically blocking it. Because as I'd said last time, the fact of putting solar on top of these larger flat roofed buildings, even fourplexes and duplexes, the ones for the 20s that have flat roofs, creates the thermal barrier, which helps to cool the building. And again, DWP has been resisting this less so than Southern California Edison, but they've still been resisting rooftop solar and not helping to figure out how to do that for buildings that have multiple units and maybe house power that does not generate that would generate a ton of electricity but doesn't use a lot of electricity. So that's the first thing. I really want to know how DWP would expedite the installation of rooftop solar. And then the second thing is just a quick story. Since our last meeting, the LA Times has run 3 articles, which or case in point. First was related to this specific requirement of for landlords to install AC, and there was one sentence in the entire article that basically questioned, so how are landlords going to pay that? And they just basically blew right over it. The second article was about the large number of mom and pop landlords who have sold their properties because, especially since COVID, because they simply could not afford to keep their own buildings because of the housing department, because of COVID, and all of these. It's so easy, as I said last time, for government officials to pass the buck and say, hey, we can't figure this out, so screw it. We're just going to make the landlords pay for it. And that's exactly what this is. So many mom and pop owners have sold to, wait for it, institutional investor, multifamily, owners. So now you've got the mom and pops who are generally more caring, more responsive, who are selling out to these large corporations. The third article was the huge number of evictions, again, wait for it, by the institutional owners. The preponderance of all evictions are by these large institutional owners. Mom and pops generally don't issue 3-day notices. The institutional owners do the second they are delinquent. And so they give no courtesy, they give no benefit. And there are thousands of, actually it was more, tens of thousands of eviction notices that were issued, and they're most all by these institutional owners. So again, be careful what you wish for, because these people are going to just say, screw it. I am sick of this. I'm just going to sell. And again, guess who's buying them? And guess who doesn't give a shit about tenants? I told Eileen, I think I've had 2 late payment penalties in the, 30 years that I've owned property. I work with my tenants, and only when they're belligerent is that I say, okay, fine, you're going to pay late payment. If I were institutional, if I were a good business person, there's no way I would be issuing them. They would be paying late fees every single time that they are late, and I would make a ton of money off of that. So anyhow, those are just interesting
Steve,
things.
that was LA Times articles?
Yes.
Steve, those were LA Times articles?
Yeah, all 3 LA Times articles.
You have the dates?
They were recent.
Yeah, let me look them up. I'll
want to refer to them, I think.
Yeah, maybe what I'll do, Laura, if you've got your phone, I could text you the links while we're on this. Or maybe I email them to you.
Email so much better.
Okay, I'll email them to you.
If you have them right there, you can put them in the chat. Say if you want, or just email me for. If you don't, email you. Yeah, email me after. Well, I'll share. I will share.
Okay. Yeah.
So I like how this is shaping up. I can see how Laura will be able to really help and make sure that we get something presented to the board that looks very correct and formal. I do think that we should preface it by saying we do recognize and acknowledge the right of tenants to live in a unit that can be brought to a temperature of 75 degrees in the event of a heat wave. And yes, the city of LA can mandate that landlords provide a unit that can be kept or brought to something like 75 degrees. And then that would lead to the first point, which is we think that the city should create a standard of too hot. And I also think we should ask the city to find out what violations occur. They shouldn't just assume that 191,000 units are all too hot in a heat wave. Because I don't know if it's half of them, if it's 2/3. I think we would want to somehow get that information from residents. And then 3 would be empower residents to use incentives and rebates somehow. I wrote down, please require the DWP to actually analyze the apparatus that would have how the apparatus would affect the grid.
Well, it's the overall grid.
Yeah,
Right, because what they've done in this report, this interim report, we
Yeah.
agreed, is compared the different kinds of air conditioners impact on the grid,
Yeah.
but they didn't say what's gonna happen to the total grid if every single apartment in LA has air conditioning.
and turn it on all
And
at the
turn
same
it on
time.
all at the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then also I think we should have some caveats about what you just talked about, the potential pass-through costs. So that whole subject is to avoid potential pass-through costs from, avoid losing mom and pops to institutional investor corporations. Avoid evictions by these institutional owners.
Well, and that all comes under a kind of higher category of, there's been no discussion on the part of city officials
Yeah.
as to how do landlords not pay for air conditioners, but rather how do landlords pay for, when needed, rewiring an aging apartment building to accommodate these air conditioners. And there's a number somewhere, I just don't have it, of what percentage of apartment buildings, multifamily buildings in Los Angeles were built before, I don't know, World War II. I mean, there are numbers.
Yeah.
The census looks at that every 10 years. The census, that's part of the census.
You know, one thing that Steve brought up, or that's coming to my mind, about the institutional, and I think we're making an assumption in the sense that this thing is supposedly doing public good,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems more like it's written to incentivize or help institutional and corporate America type operation, the big guys rather than the small. So I'm saying it's not meant for mom and pops. It's meant for somebody, and that's what part of the nefariousness is that an institutional owner would definitely use this as a ploy to empty a building because they're looking at it, from a whole different
Okay.
perspective than a mom and pop.
I have reposted, I hope you guys can see this, reposted the actual motion. And I've tried to navigate it better than I was able to navigate that other document. So basically it says, as our city grapples with the devastating impact of climate change, we must ensure our residents are equipped with the tools to, maintain highest standard of livability. Extreme heat emergencies can lead to dangerous and even deadly consequences, especially among our elders. So at this point in the climate emergency, the ability to cool one's home cannot be considered a luxury. It must be treated as a necessity. And I'm kind of skimming. Requiring cooling apparatus for all residential rental units could be a life-saving measure for countless Angelenos. And yet, they're worried about a crippling energy bill. But the worry about the crippling energy bill gets lost in the next sentence, which is, I move that the Housing Department and the Department of Building and Safety report on potential code amendments that require cooling apparatus.
Report on.
Right, that doesn't get rid of the crippling energy costs. And then I further move that the DWP, CAO, and the LAHD's Housing Department report on potential programs to assist those tenants. So they don't mention landlords. They don't mention how to, again, upgrade the aging units across the city. So this is the motion we're responding to. So I don't mean we're not responding in all our conversations, but this motion simply doesn't mention owners.
And all it's asking for is a report on potential
Well,
code amendments.
Well, that's right. And so, but but once they report on potential code amendments,
They might just.
they might adopt those potential code amendments, so.
But at least we don't have to be defensive
Right.
in our wording.
Right.
We can say, thank you for taking this up. This is an
Right.
important issue.
Exactly.
Okay. We mentioned that they're not specifying people who are at most risk or identifying. Or
Well, they did
They
say,
only mentioned the elderly,
Elderly.
elders,
Yeah.
instead of like disabled
Right.
too.
well, they didn't mention the valley versus the city.
Right.
I mean, it's
That's
hotter,
just-
I mean,
that's
you know,
much
in other
harder.
words,
Right.
well, it's much hotter
Yeah,
in the valley,
Right.
and maybe
maybe that's who.
it's more important to make sure you have air conditioning there, and the housing
But they're-
stock is not as old.
Yeah.
Right, so they may have a better you know, I mean, in other
That's
words,
what I'm saying, it's too broad, the whole thing is just way too broad.
okay, and I do want to point out the time.
So I've taken notes, and then of course we'll have the transcript. Is everyone pretty comfortable with us coming up with,
Right.
in the next two,
Yeah.
3 days or week, a draft document that we could share with
Right.
people?
And
Yes.
Charlie, we remember that you volunteered, we didn't do anything, you missed the first part of the meeting where everyone admitted they did nothing for the last 30 days.
No problem. I'm just here if you need me.
Yeah, what we said is Charlie, Elizabeth, and Laura need to draft this. Like
Okay.
you said. But it's just that nobody did anything in the last 30 days. So that's why we're running the transcript this time, and we have all the words.
I wanna amend that. We're doing plenty of things.
Oh,
We
we're
just
doing
didn't
plenty of things, we
finish
didn't do this
task.
thing, yes.
Elizabeth, did you also mention as far as power consumption about requiring DWP to expedite the installation of rooftop solar?
Solar panels, right? Are you talking about solar panels?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, that's in my notes, for sure.
Oh.
Yeah. And also we could say to make sure that in so doing, we do not increase our emissions.
yeah, and battery backups too, because a lot of these will be used at night, and so with the installation of the rooftop solar, they all should have battery backup.
Well, that's nice. I have solar panels, no battery backup.
One last thing, as far as Laura had mentioned it, increasing the value of properties by upgrading electrical. That is negligible because it's my building is I have two buildings that one was from the 20s and it had 40 amp breakers. The one from the 1960s is the one that had 30 amp breakers, again, for 2-bedroom units. So it is pretty crazy that they actually, the requirement went down in the 60s, which strikes me as pretty odd. But just by rewiring the building, that generally does not produce any gain in value to
Well,
the landlord.
And that would certainly not be part of any CIS anyway. It was just a side remark on my part. But,
And, you know, honestly, we have 3 landlords in the room, at least 3. I don't know any more than that, but we need Davina to weigh in. She's our one
we haven't
tenant.
seen her in months and months and months. Yeah.
And Eunice Councilmember Hernandez, she is a renter and she has a history of really going after landlords. So she has an axe to grind. So for whatever
Well,
it's worth.
she may also just not have a knowledge base. I mean, you know, this is not the only kind of thing that would trigger where someone would have to rewire. The insurance companies are now going after these small, older buildings as well, just so we're clear. So, you know, it's,
And the
there's
vote
a lot
was-
going on.
And the vote was unanimous.
Right, so what we need here, I guess, just to be technically proper, is a motion from this committee that would say, based on our conversations at this month and a month ago, you know, at 2 meetings, we are authorizing Elizabeth and a subcommittee to draft the final proposed community impact statement for the UNNC governing board to consider. That's the motion. I'm not gonna say it again. It's in the transcript.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone want a
I
second?
move- Are you making the motion? That's the, you made the motion?
I made that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Laura moved, Ed seconded. And to remind everyone, everyone on this call may vote.
Awesome. I'll call for a vote. Any more discussion? Anybody else want to add anything? Christy? Or Charlie? Anything to add?
Ready to vote?
Nothing from me.
Cool, cool. All right, everybody who is in favor of Laura's motion,
I,
raise your hand or, yay, it is unanimous. Woo.
I am looking, oh, is this it? I'm looking for the transcript.
I'm curious about what the other neighborhood councils will come up with on their own,
If anything.
if anything.
Okay, so report from, and next item, report from NCSA.
Right, so I was on an hour-and-a-half call on Sunday from Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, and a couple of key agenda items. One was where did I write it down here? LA Fire Department and fire suppression measures, and that was in the hillsides. I can't remember what neighborhood it brought up, but it was talking about how the Los Angeles Fire Department does not seem to be on board with natives.
Native plants.
Native plants, and they have instituted across-board fire suppression methods, which mean to not only clear from the house any shrubbery, but also in the yard to either limb things up or remove them entirely, my understanding. So they're fighting back against that because it doesn't take into account what natives do in an environment. And that natives are often ground covers, or they need to be in a shrub-like state. And then also apparently many or most natives are naturally fire suppressants for some reason. So the rules have to be different. So anyway, that happened. They wanted to remove mustard from a hillside, which is just a fire trap apparently. And I offered our services. I said, just have an event and we'll come to it. But the one that was most controversial perhaps was that Jamie York was a person who was nominated for the ethics committee, which is at this point like 2 or 3 members down, so they can't, they don't have quorum, so the ethics commission, which we know we need, cannot meet. And when she was brought up, this is what I've heard, when she was brought up to be nominated for the ethics committee, there was no discussion, there was an immediate and unanimous rejection.
No vote.
And she was absolutely stunned. Everybody was stunned. And so NCSA has decided to call for a complaint on Brown Act. Because it was mystifying why they voted so unanimously and so quickly. And so the assumption is that there was some discussion behind the scenes, which is a Brown Act violation. That's what's going on. I voiced my support for that complaint.
Well, this item will be possibly on the executive committee meeting agenda for Tuesday. We have a really long agenda, but the Los Angeles LANC, which is the alliance, so there's, for those who don't know, there's a bunch of alliances for neighborhood councils. Sustainability Alliance, there's a Emergency Preparation Alliance, there's a citywide Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Alliance, there's South LA Alliance, there's Planning and Zoning Alliance, basically. So the citywide, the LA Citywide Alliance has asked neighborhood councils to take this up.
Okay.
So it's just we have so much else on the agenda that may be on the agenda, but we may never get to it.
Okay, do anybody else have anything to add on that? Because it was new information to me. I don't know anything about Jamie.
Well, we got an email after we put it on this agenda.
Yeah, I got an email too. I don't know anything about that.
I heard that she was a little loud.
Oh, well,
She
no, I
was
do know
unable.
something about Jamie, because she's the gal who, some of you may remember, she actually tracked, very loud, she did the mathematical tracking of the monies for the elections for 2021. So Dunn was given a lot of money to spend to do marketing for that election, not the 23 neighborhood council elections. And she tracked that money and where it went. And much of it went to nonprofits who didn't even get hired or paid until after the election was over. Yeah, it's one of the bad things that she revealed. So she's like
Nice.
investigative.
Nice.
So she's not well liked in some corners, clearly.
But, yeah.
But she came to our neighborhood council. Okay,
Okay, that's it.
all right,
So I hope you all will, if I find out about a mustard clearing event, that you'll don your gloves.
okay, so, update on KYCC tree plantings on Washington Boulevard. So, this is a project that's been going on since 2019, but we seemingly are getting closer to getting our trees, this committee, getting our trees planted on Washington Boulevard. And as we were waiting, suddenly there were some trees planted on Washington Boulevard and on Third Ave, and then on 18th Street just by Western. It's like, where did those trees come from? And we asked KYCC and some other kind of tree entities, did you plant the trees? Did you plant the trees? Did you plant the trees? And everyone said no. And whoever did plant the trees, they didn't get permits for them. Oops. But it turns out it was KYCC after all, but not our project.
Okay.
They had some leftover grant funds from another project, and they had already inspected these particular locations. So we're still getting our trees planted, but now they're once again reevaluating the locations because they've taken some of our locations.
Okay, but trees are there.
Trees are there,
Okay.
so trees are there, so
How are
that,
they being maintained?
well, that's a good question, that's one of the things we're asking now. For our purposes, if, they're gonna ask, once we get this a little more settled out, maybe by next month's meeting, they are gonna ask us to now start identifying more funds for the years 2 and 3, watering and maintenance, because the funds we gave them was only year 1.
But they haven't even started.
Yeah, they're right, but
Okay.
we had always agreed
Yes, of
that
course.
once
But
the
let's-
trees go in.
Yeah.
And we're gonna find sources of other funds. I'm just giving you guys an alert, because it won't be UNNC, our budget these days is so small compared to when it was before. I mean, I don't see us having a lot of funds. I mean, certainly not the $7,000 a year that they're gonna need.
Now, are they taking money out of our account to water the trees that they just planted?
No, that was from a different grant.
And that grant included tree watering?
Oh, we sure hope so, because you're not supposed to plant trees these days
No.
without that. But, I mean, yes, we don't want more dead trees.
Have they planted any trees for us?
No, they're
No
still,
trees, not even
our
5.
project hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
We're still in year 0. About to be in year 1. So, I mean, they still have the funds set aside.
And they have identified areas.
We have identified areas. It's just that they included some of those spots we just planted trees in.
Okay.
So those are not our trees.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, so, I mean, they are our trees, they're right here. And I guess, speaking of, and I don't know, Steve, if you may have gotten an email on this too, but there will be the last Saturday of September, it looks like Council District 10 is doing a cleanup of Washington Boulevard, which would include maybe some weeding from Arlington, starting at Arlington and going east to Normandy. So the section between Normandy and Arlington,
What date?
To me,
whatever the last Saturday is. I will send an e-blast.
Yeah.
I'll send you guys the thing right now, but we'll send this.
September?
are they asking
September.
for neighborhood participation? or is
Oh,
this-
they want people, yes.
Okay,
They're
well,
asking for
yeah.
people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely let me know.
And there's probably food involved in this.
Because I know that, I mean, the HPLC probably.
Right. It's just unfortunate it's not including Arlington West to Crenshaw. I mean, it's good for those of us who live east,
Yeah.
but some of the trashiest spots are west, but, okay, anyway, but for Steve, we'll let, for Harvard Heights, West Adams Heights, Angeles Vista, Western Heights, those are our neighborhoods, so, but we should bring tools to weed the tree wells, because we're environmental committee.
Mhm.
Okay,
I just wanted to say something quick. I just wanted to say something quick about tree planting.
Yeah.
I just found out that my niece has a new job working for Cal Fire. And her job is to set up a program to go around to California communities all over the state about dealing with urban forestry and rejuvenating urban forests. So, and I
we'd
think
like our urban forest here rejuvenated, Christy.
right, I know. Well, maybe I can get her to do a program or come
Yeah.
down.
Yes, please.
That's her new job, and her
So-
responsibility will be setting up, going to all communities around the state to help them find money and programs and give
Right.
money.
Well, I thought Cal Fire has money to do this.
Yes, well, I think they do, but her job is to identify communities and help them set up the programs to plant trees.
Okay. This is sort
No.
of.
I was thinking of talking to her about, doing a speaking engagement down here in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Got a quick question. Christy?
Yes.
Everybody's talking about tree planting. What about tree maintenance? I mean, we got,
Yeah.
the palms, I got one right across the street from me. It's a fire hazard, basically.
Mhm.
And because it's they just dead fronds that are all over the tree. And it used to be 20 years ago that they would maintain the palms and all that. What about just is she involved with the tree maintenance, or who is involved with that?
I don't know the answer to that, but I assume an organization like Cal Fire would be interested in maintaining the trees properly, so that they don't burn as easily, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But we talked about that last meeting, I think, about tree trimming and who
Well,
was
tree
responsible.
But also, there are on this section of Washington, because I've been counting, at least between Normandy and Crenshaw, at least 12 now dead trees.
Mhm.
And it's not just that they keep dying, it's that nobody's removing the trees or the stumps or the cages that are surrounding them. So these are not even places where we could plant trees because they're not, it's not plantable spaces at this point. And of those dead ones, at least one and maybe two are burned trees. And then there's the burned tree on Adams, right, just west of Gramercy, on the north side by the Clark Library, that burned when the RV that was parked by it burned.
Right.
So, it's like, that's what I'm saying. People are not setting trees on fire, but we've had some fires. So the one on Washington that's burned is because the business burned and it caught the tree as well. And the insurance company seemingly is working with them on the building, but hasn't done anything about the tree. So, we have all kinds of tree issues. But, so if we plant 25, it hardly makes up it makes up, but not enough for the 12 that have died in the period of time that we've been talking about the 25, between 2019 and now. because these trees have died in that period of time. So it's a shame and shameful. So, so I would like to propose that this committee, maybe Dan would do this for us, get that grid back together, but put supplement our grid with dead trees, with actual address, the Excel, the data with the addresses of the dead trees so that we can make a request to the city. It's hard to request the city, hey, can you just remove the dead trees? You have to give them an exact location. And then I think the Bureau of Sanitation actually will remove the trees. And they are the ones who remove the cages. Anyway, okay. Do we have any other old business? I'm sinking into the sunset here.
Yeah, me too. So anybody else have any other business, any other notes? Seemed like we covered a lot.
Right. Oh, there is, this thing cuts across many different committees, but the oil drilling, the appeal of the zoning administrator's determination related to the Murphy oil site will be heard at the South Los Angeles Area Planning Commission on the first Tuesday of October, which I don't have a calendar in front of me. I think it's October 3rd. But if anybody's interested in, this will be an in-person meeting and maybe also on Zoom, but if you're interested in this, it'll be in person at 83rd in Vermont at the South LA Constituent Services Center. And it's at 4:30 in the afternoon. It's going to be crowded, I'm sure. And basically what happened is that the zoning administrator imposed a lot of additional conditions on the operations of the oil drilling site at Gramercy and Adams on the south side of the street, the Murphy site. And the oil company has appealed some, not all, of those conditions. So,
Are those conditions being capturing methane, containing methane?
probably not.
So what would the conditions be?
There's just a lot of them, but that doesn't sound familiar.
Okay.
Well, they're not harvesting gas anymore.
Oh, okay.
SoCal Gas is not accepting methane from local. There's a whole other thing that happened about 10 years ago. So the pipelines, the gas pipelines, it's methane, the gas pipelines over time were failing. They had little pinprick holes in them, so that they just basically aren't doing that anymore. So the methane is just being repumped back into the ground.
Okay.
Not being, I'll use the word, not being harvested.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I don't know where.
So,
it is.
I have no idea, but I doubt the conditions have anything to do with it.
Okay.
Because it's not a product there anymore.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but it's not a product. One of the things that the new operator did do, because they didn't have any gas being pumped out of the ground, they actually paid to have a new, the gas, SoCal Gas brought gas into the facility so they could operate their own generators to generate electricity, because they couldn't use their own. They weren't pumping, but that's a violation. So they may have been ordered to remove that. So it's like 30 some conditions. My point is, if anybody's interested in this, it's not really this committee that's been dealing with it over the years. We have the Planning and Zoning Committee has a subcommittee on oil and gas. So it's Chris Carlson and Steve Peckman. We're not going to take a new position anyway. We've dealt hours and hours and hours of meetings on it. We'll probably review the appeal next Wednesday at Planning and Zoning, but we won't be voting on anything. And so if anybody's interested, just read your emails. If it ends up on the planning and zoning agenda, you will see it. Okay.
All right, I think it is 8:41 and
Yes.
I think we're good. This meeting is adjourned until next month.
Bye-bye,
Thank you guys.
Bye,
Yeah.
thanks.
Saving that. Whoops, where'd it go?
I was looking for this picture. I got a picture.
Charlie.
Oh, there she went.